Hello, everyone. My name is Anant Jhingran, and we are so glad to have you. I'm the CTO for Apigee, and many of you are either Apigee customers or looking into an API program. And what we'll do today in the next 40-odd minutes, and then leave plenty of time for Q&A after that, is to walk you through how, as you're thinking about APIs, you really need to think about ecosystems in almost the same breath, and what are the best practices that you should use in order to actually win in ecosystems, and some tools that Apigee and Google can bring to actually help you. We are going to cover these 6 topics. Of course, why API-driven ecosystems help your business. We'll talk about 2 kinds of ecosystems. There are several ways to get ecosystems wrong, and there are several ways to get them right. We'll talk about 3 keys to getting them right. We'll focus a bit on developers, because we think that among all the things that you need to get right to do your ecosystems, you have to get developers right. We'll talk a bit about how Google is helping with both technology and kind of the Google ecosystem. And we want to just kind of end on emphasizing that you've got to kind of start now. So the question is that all of you do understand the power of APIs. You're either using the APIs internally to help your teams innovate faster, build out microservices, or connect with each other in some way, shape, or form, kind of creating kind of a vibrant internal ecosystem. Or you're creating an API so that you can kind of connect with partners or third-party developers so that you can actually increase the demand of your services. The question is this, that if you build out an API, whether it's internal facing or external, will people come and use that API? In order to kind of bring the demand to your APIs, to your services that are fronted by APIs, you need to be able to attract developers. Developers need to build apps. Those apps have got to be used. And when those apps are used, then that is when actually the demand happens for your APIs. So carrying all 4, building an awesome API, Apigee of course helps in helping you build those APIs, attracting developers, making sure developers build apps that people will love, and then making sure those apps are actually popular. For example, whether they're internal or external, whatever it is, all of that requires a lot of effort. The good thing is that ecosystems can actually help you in that climb uphill that's actually needed in order to make your API-based program successful by bringing demand to it. Ecosystems, lots of definitions of ecosystems, but for the purpose of this discussion today, ecosystems are partnerships where each partner is kind of focused on the core strength, and together you and your partner win in the market. That's what ecosystems are all about. So in the context of our world, what you want to do is that heavy lifting that you've got to do, which is build out an API, which you've got to do, attract developers, build apps, attract users and others. Is it possible that some part of the value chain can actually be driven by others, so that there's a partnership between you and multiple other parties in order to actually drive a demand to your business? If you do it right, and we'll give you some tricks about how some of the other customers are doing it, you can actually significantly reduce the effort in order to actually succeed with your API services program. Now, there are 2 ways of doing it. Way number 1 is for you to say that, look, you are the center of the universe, and people will come to your ecosystem. They'll register, developers will register as your developers. Developers will sign up, and you will figure out a way of both getting the developers, but also leveraging their apps and others. Or the second one is what we call connect, which is to say that, look, you are great at some things, and some other folks are great at others. And it's possible that others have built up a developer ecosystem or a consumer ecosystem, and that you should be able to connect to them. So we'll talk about examples of both. And I'll only give you the kind of punchline. The punchline in this is that most probably you'll end up using a blend of both of these approaches. And also that developers are central to whichever approach you actually take. So let's first talk about building your own ecosystem. What you want to do is to build a platform where there's a virtuous cycle. You put out an API, developers build, developers come to it, they build apps to it, the apps get used. As the apps get used, you realize that more APIs need to be brought on board, and those APIs may be either your APIs or third-party APIs that are surfaced through your platform, and then this virtuous cycle goes on and on and on, and then you, over time, are at the center of this particular ecosystem universe where the developers, apps, and third-party APIs are all revolving around you. And of course, it's difficult to do, but it's been done, right? To give you an example, Magazine Luiza is an extremely large retailer in Brazil with over $4 billion of revenue. And what Magazine Luiza realized is that they can obviously sell the stuff that they have through their standard retail channels, which any good e-commerce based company would do, and obviously APIs help them. But what they realized was something even stronger. What they realized is that they actually can be at the center of some world because they have got a lot of consumers that kind of come to them. So why wouldn't we actually sell them certain other services which may or may not actually be Magazine Luiza own services? So what they did was they actually opened up their supply side of their APIs to not just be APIs around products and others that they sell, but also other banking services and other things that their consumers were actually caring about. And as a result of that, on the left-hand side, they realized that they were actually increasing the demand, and they were able to kind of create a virtuous cycle with Magazine Luiza in the middle, exposing their own APIs and third-party APIs that attracted more and more developers, and they were able to create a virtuous cycle. So they've gone from having few tens of thousands SKUs to millions of SKUs because they have realized that they needed to become a platform for delivering a lot of digital services to the customers that they actually attracted. So Magazine Luiza did it, and of course you would kind of think about all the classic ones, like whatever that kind of come to your mind, whether it is eBay's of the world, or whether it is Uber's or any others. You do realize that all of them have kind of built out successful ecosystems that connect consumers, developers, and suppliers together. But it requires a lot of effort. It requires effort with respect to investment. It requires effort on making sure that you don't lose track of your focus. You have to act with speed, and you've got to kind of spend on developers. So what we are going to do is just focus on 2 or 3 of these things and try to bring it home for you, both with respect to real-world examples as well as with the simulation, and we hope that you enjoy that. So let's play a simulation game. Let's assume that you are in a market and your competitor is in a market too. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to attract suppliers, and consumers come to you because you've got enough supply of something. The supply can be your own services or it could be third-party services. And your supply is represented by red dots, and your consumers are represented by blue dots. And let's assume for a minute, it's a very, very simple model, that when consumers come in, consumers decide to either go to your ecosystem. You can pick to be ecosystem 1 if you want, and you can pick yourself to be ecosystem 2. But they decide to go to the ecosystem that has more suppliers. And so what the consumers are doing is that they are kind of tossing a coin. And if there are 7 suppliers on the left and 3 suppliers on the right, then the consumers with 7 by 10 probability go to the left, and with 3 by 10 probability go to the right. It's just a model. It's a simple model that kind of reflects some basic principles of people are attracted to where there's enough supply, but obviously it's not 100%, and therefore we have kind of introduced a probabilistic model to it. Similarly, you can make exactly the same decision with respect to suppliers, which is the suppliers go where there's more consumers, but again, it is a probabilistic choice. Obviously, in real world, the models are much more complicated, but this simple enough model is actually enough to show some of the critical factors in order for you to actually be able to win with your ecosystem. Now, if you actually want to solve this from first principles, it's interesting for those of you who love calculus. This particular one is fairly straightforward to solve and is based on some differential equations, but things actually get a bit more complicated. But I love doing calculus with my kid, and therefore this is something that I really enjoy. But watching it in simulation is actually more fun. So let's have a starting position. Let's give ecosystem 1 supplier and 1 consumer, and let's give ecosystem 2 1 supplier and 1 consumer. But everything else is the same, okay? And let's see what happens. Now, as we expected, you would think that the 2 would do equally well because the conditions are about the same. And let's see what really happens. So as you can see, in this particular case, ecosystem 2 got a lot more, right? Which is somewhat surprising because we had set this up as equal. And so when we ran this simulation again, and this time, as you saw, it was somewhat balanced. The critical part about this is that even if the conditions are the same, as we set them up, there is enough variance in real life. There's enough variance in real life. And this is true even for you. Even if you have a perfect strategy and you are either your competitor or you are mimicking each other's strategies, there's enough variance in real life. There's a probabilistic model built into the simulation that ensures that it's almost never that each of them ends up with 50-50 of the market. But of course, if you run this enough number of times, then ecosystem 1 wins once and ecosystem 2 wins the second time. So the main lesson out of this part of the simulation is that if all conditions are equal, it may still be the case that you'll win more than you should or you'll lose more than you should because the world is full of randomness and there are things that are not modeled in the simulation like execution or something else that could actually come in and make a big difference for you. But this is all fun. Everybody is starting at the same time, but really nobody actually starts at the same time, right? Let us assume for a minute that you are ecosystem 2 and you are a large company and you've got to kind of study and understand whether you really want to do this or don't want to do this. And you're going to take a look at it and you'll come back in 3 months or 4 months and make a case and everything else. So let's actually introduce a delay in ecosystem 2. Even though they observe that ecosystem 1 is taking off, ecosystem 2 takes some time to actually get its act together. And let's see what really happens at that point in time. As I'm assuming you guys are seeing, what's really going to go on is that ecosystem 2 is actually going to do much worse, okay? So what we did was we introduced a simulation. I don't know whether you guys observed it, but what we did was we actually started attracting the suppliers and consumers to ecosystem 2 after some time. And then what happened was that just the kind of size and the market dominance of ecosystem 1 just basically overwhelmed anything that ecosystem 2 could do. And in effect, what this tells you is that if you snooze, you lose. Okay? So you have to act with a sense of urgency because the way the ecosystem dynamics work is that starting late is almost never a good strategy. But on the other hand, the playing field is not equal. Remember till now, all the rules of the game were equal except the ecosystem 2 started late. But the fact of the matter is that you, as an enterprise company, even if you are more deliberative in making your decisions, you have got some inherent advantages. You may have a good consumer base. You may actually have some physical locations. You may know your supply chain extremely well, et cetera, et cetera. And what fun is it in competing on other people's terms? You should actually compete with your strengths, right? So let's give ecosystem 2 a strength. Let us say that instead of just saying that suppliers come to the ecosystem that has most consumers in that probabilistic distribution, let us actually have suppliers come more towards ecosystem 2 because you, as ecosystem 2, have some phenomenal relationship. So even though while they kind of toss a coin to decide whether they want to go left or go right, that coin is biased so that they actually build upon the relationships that you actually have. So if you kind of think about it, and there could be many other inherent advantages that you have, but let us assume that instead of playing to other person's rules, you actually play to your rules. Let's see what happens in this particular case. So we still made you slow. You can see that we introduced delay, but we gave you supply strength. And in the previous case, when you were just slower, and you play to other person's rules, you actually didn't get much. But suddenly, if you actually are able to leverage your strength, which is in this case I showed supply strength, you are actually able to get 30% of the market, quite simply because you have to really, you may have some disadvantage like you're a larger enterprise, but you have tons of advantages, and you've got to actually make sure that you follow your ecosystem strategy, leveraging those advantages. Okay, so for you to kind of build up your platform, you need to get these things on the right, correct. We talked a bit about act with a sense of urgency and focus on strength. I'll talk about developers in the next section. And of course, you need to kind of build out a phenomenal platform. Obviously, Apigee is there to kind of help you build out that fantastic platform. But the platform by itself will not help you win. You've got to do the things on the right correctly also. So this is all good. This is all interesting and important, and Maxine Louisa did it, and many of you are doing it, and many of you are succeeding with it. But is there another way? So if you recall, I said you can either try to be at the center of that ecosystem universe, or you can say, look, I'm good at food, and others are good at bar, and let me actually connect with what the others are good at. So for example, you may decide that if you are attracting consumers, you may decide that Google and Facebook have tons of consumers. Or if you're attracting developers, you may decide that iOS or AWS or Google Play or Google Cloud have lots of developers. And so the good thing about your APIs are that your APIs can actually permeate into the network. And you can actually make your APIs and others available in various forms, SDKs as an example or otherwise, for where the developers are on the left. Instead of getting the developers to come to you, you can send your services to the developers, or you can actually connect with consumer platforms on the right. So let's take a look of an example on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, and then I'll show you an example on the right-hand side. So Walgreens, a customer of Apigee's, is just phenomenal with respect to understanding that it has a core strength, which is its retail presence. And the question is, can it actually bring consumers who are either Walgreens consumers or not Walgreens customers to visit Walgreens? And what they did was they actually decided to build out an API for the entire storefront, photo printing and prescriptions and many other things that you can think of. And then they said that, look, what we are going to do is we are going to actually leverage the Apple developers and the Google Play developers, and we will make our APIs attractive to them. And if we make our APIs attractive to them, then their applications will become popular. And when their applications become popular and their applications get used, and when people want to, for example, print photos, then they will drive traffic both to Google's Walgreens APIs, but also physical traffic to Walgreens store. And what they realized is that with that, they were able to increase by 6x their shopping cart amount. People who combined digital with physical had 6x the shopping cart amount. But the central thing that you all should get out of it is that they realize that there is an ecosystem that is not just Walgreens ecosystem, and they need to go and connect with iOS and Play ecosystems. Pitney Bowes, which is a B2B company, said that, look, we know where developers are. Some developers come to us, some developers don't come to us, but we know that a lot of developers begin their journey by looking for information. And one place where they look for information is on search engines. So what if we actually buy presence on search engine, so that when somebody is looking for, let's say, a geotags API, and she comes to, let's say, Google search, she should be able to get visibility into the services that are offered. And so what John Spinney and others have done phenomenally well at Pitney Bowes is take what was essentially a B2B manufacturing company, convert it into wonderful APIs, but then also figure out that they need to be visible and present to where the developers are. And they've done that through ads and many other capabilities. So both of those, so Walgreens decided to attract developers that kind of hang around iOS and Play ecosystems, and Pitney Bowes decided to attract developers who were coming to search properties to look for information, and they wanted to make sure that they actually found them. But in both of them, they were connecting to different ecosystems. Maxine Louisa, remember I talked to you about how Maxine Louisa has become a platform. But in addition to Maxine Louisa becoming a platform, Maxine Louisa also realized that Facebook in Brazil has many, many more users than Maxine Louisa does. And they felt that it's really, really important for them to have their capabilities show up in Facebook, not just with ads, the way Pitney Bowes or others might have done. But they actually set up virtual storefronts in Facebook. And of course, those storefronts were set up in such a way that the people who own those storefronts could actually go and sell Magazine Louisa goods to their friends and family they were all connected to at Facebook. But again, this was an example of Magazine Louisa realizing that their capabilities had to connect into a Facebook ecosystem because the consumers were there, and instead of bringing consumers all the way to Magazine Louisa where they might have been the friction, they decided to actually go to where the consumers are. So Magazine Louisa is an example of somebody who had actually tried both. Now, if you decide to actually connect with other ecosystems, you have to do similar sets of things as you have to do if you're building your own platform. You've got to kind of spend, you've got to have fantastic APIs on the south side. You've got to be able to connect with eyeballs and everything else. But also, you've got to kind of spend on developers. Remember, I've been kind of talking about spend on developers. So let's kind of take a look at this as an example. So you've got to spend on attracting developers. So let's kind of play the same simulation game. But this time, you as ecosystem 2 realize that if you are able to attract developers are shown in yellow, then developers can actually bring you demand from ecosystem 1 all the way to you. So for example, if you're a Walgreens, you do realize that the app that the developers are building sits on iOS or Play, and the consumers are really consumers of Apple or Google, but those consumers can actually drive demand into their services, and of course, in this case, actually a physical walk-in. So the beautiful thing about developers are that if you focus on external developers, they are sometimes a fantastic connective tissue between your ecosystem and others, and can actually help bring demand from other ecosystems into you. And of course, they can actually help bring supply and all that, but we'll only focus on demand side. So let's play the same ecosystem, but this time let's kind of have you spend to get to developers. And look at what happens. Here the developers are popping in, shown in yellow, and suddenly, even though you were late and we didn't give you any other bias, like you were actually able to do attraction of suppliers, just by spending on developers, you can actually bring demand to your ecosystems. Okay, so what I've told you is that you should act with speed. Okay, you should act with you should leverage your core spend, but you should also spend on developers. Of course, those are kind of core business concepts that you must have. Obviously, in this case, platforms help. Apigee has a phenomenal developer portal that helps you attract developers, and we continue to work on technology that will help you connect with at least the Google ecosystems that I'll talk about in a little bit. But the central idea is that technology helps, but you really need to have focus as a business. Developers are key. I wanted to play this video. All of you have seen it. Please go look up Steve Ballmer, developers, and he's a firm believer. Of course, he kind of takes it to the extreme, but you all understand, and we all understand that developers are key. In his concept, it was to build out the Microsoft ecosystem. In your concept, it will be how we actually attract applications and end consumers and users to your services. This particular slide, we have just put out a 2019 prediction, API prediction. Please go take a look at it. It's on our standard blog. The link is being displayed out there. We would love for you to read this. I'm just going to kind of extract some parts of it because they're relevant for the discussion today. But we talk about API standards, we talk about many other things, not just about ecosystems. We talk about bots and rise of machine learning and others. So please do take a look at that. So what we found in preparation for this particular API predictions blog article that Ed and I wrote was that less than 50% of Fortune 5,000 or Fortune 500 companies have a developer-facing property. So forget even about APIs, less than 50% of Fortune 500 even consider the fact that developers on the outside can actually make a difference to them. In contrast, 94% of the largest 100 web properties defined by who have the maximum number of pages in a large sample of the web, they not only had a developer-facing property, but they actually offered open API-based APIs. So what this contrast of previous slide and this slide tells me is that just because you're large doesn't mean you're savvy to the fact that developers are important to your success. But if you are savvy about the web and the internet, you actually do realize that developers are really, really critical for your success. So we have got just a very, very simple poll that we want to conduct with you. We'll give kind of 1 minute for each of these, Jay, if that's okay. The first question in this poll is, do you have an external facing property? You should be able to fill this survey out. Okay. And then the second one is, if you answered yes or were planning to have a developer-facing API, developer-facing property, right? You could have a developer-facing property that just has an SDK or just has an how-to or just has contact us, right? We hope not, but maybe that's the case. Really, all of the things that I've talked about really sing when you have an API, and hopefully you have an API also, but we would like to actually hear about that too. So Jay, should we just wait for, or shall we just continue? So we'll let you answer this, I guess, at your own. Take your time and answer it. It should be done by now. We don't exactly know this. I'm getting used to this system also. But you have got to figure out whether you are among the 50% of the large companies that don't understand about developers, or whether you are among the 94% of the really web-savvy companies that actually really understand that developers make a huge difference to them. And companies like Walgreens and Magazine Louisa and others really are both large companies, but also extremely web-savvy and developer-savvy. And hopefully, you all think exactly the same way. So I've kind of just got a very, very fast path through tons of things that you're going to worry about. As you build your ecosystem, you can kind of think about your own platform, your own virtual cycle shown in the middle, or you can connect with developer ecosystems, supplier ecosystems, consumer ecosystems, we talked about them, or even app ecosystems and others. And we are going to actually help you with technology. Our Apigee platform, the platform that helps you build out awesome APIs, the platform that helps you build out developer-facing properties, the platform that helps you understand what you need to do with respect to monetizing those APIs and others. We can actually help you there to build out your own platform. And of course, we continue to work with the broader Google to actually help you connect with Google ecosystems on the right-hand side. That is something that we're working with, and I'll give you kind of some teasers of what's really going on. But in reality, a lot of this is on you. So let me just kind of give you some examples of things that we're doing to help you all connect to Google ecosystem. One thing that we're doing is, just like Pitney Bowes realized that developers actually come to Google ecosystem, they're looking for information, and if they can kind of surface their information, in their case by ads, then they will drive traffic to their stuff. So what we realize is that if we actually help you annotate your APIs appropriately, where you've got your open API schema, but if you can kind of extend it with some how-to schema and others, we can actually help answer questions to developers as they come to search and they're looking for APIs. And here, for example, we've shown what we've been doing with Walgreens APIs and others. And for those of you interested, please contact me, and we'll kind of help you onboard onto this program so that you can actually make your APIs and API portals relevant in the context of what developers are looking for when they come to Google Search. We are also working on it's not just developers who come for Google Search, but also consumers who come for come to Google search, as you all know. So what is it that we can do to actually drive traffic from consumers straight to your APIs? One of the things that we're doing is, the first thing that we're doing is to actually enable package tracking. So when consumers come and ask for information on their package tracking, we are able to connect with, and we have kind of onboarded 2 or 3 suppliers, and we are working on more. We're on, obviously, and for those of you who are interested in it and are in package tracking business or logistics business, again, please contact me. But what you can do is just straight drive demand from consumers looking for information to your API. And obviously, your brand will be there so that it will be saying that this is powered by XPO or what have you, and will allow people to actually click through and get to your subsystem. But again, the idea really is that how do you drive traffic to all the services that you're building? And Google happens to be both a place where developers come as well as consumers come. We'll expand to other verticals, but right now we are focused on package tracking, and we are focused on kind of how to make this kind of rack and stackable so that the shape of your API and the shape of what Google search needs can be that impedance can be managed either by Google or either by Apigee or by your own, but how do you actually make it and rack and stack that? So in conclusion, we have got technology, we've got Apigee with its API platform, Apigee with its dev portal. We have got technology that we're working on with what we call Connect with Google to enable your APIs to be surfaced on Google surfaces, but most of it really is on you. There are tons of things that you need to do. Don't forget the 3 golden rules. Act with speed. If you're slow, if you snooze, you may lose. If you're a big company, don't forget your core strengths. Don't play by other person's rules. Play by your rules. And most importantly, developers are somebody who are actually going to make a huge difference for you, and you need to actually spend on developers. If you do it right, you can take a bow, and you will win in the market. But as soon as you take a bow, you're going to start running again, because the fact of the matter is that in this world, for every time you think that you have the right ecosystem, other people are playing to their strengths, not to your strengths, and other people are figuring out new strategies to attract developers. And therefore, even if you get this right, you just have to just kind of continuously run and evolve your strategy. I'm always reminded of this saying, which is that from Africa, which is that every day in the morning, when the sun comes up, the gazelle gets up and starts running because it has to be faster than the fastest lion. Otherwise, it might not make it to the end of the day. And every day in the morning, the lion wakes up, even though this is a lioness, the lion wakes up, it has to start running, because if it is not faster than the slowest gazelle, it will go hungry that day. So it doesn't matter whether you are a gazelle or a lion, you just have to start running. And that's the only way to actually win in this ecosystem play. So that kind of ends my prepared remarks. We want to kind of point you to the upcoming webcast. The upcoming webcast continues on this journey. We've got a phenomenal customer of ours who's going to actually talk about what they're doing with respect to building out APIs and leveraging Apigee and Apigee's portal. We'll kind of talk to you about how our portal is evolving. But they're all tricks of trade, best practices, and technology that you can leverage. But again, you have to just kind of continuously focus on not only building out awesome APIs, but actually winning the ecosystem wars and battles. Shall we open it up for questions now? Okay, let's kind of take Ashley, thank you very much for your questions. Answered. Oh, fantastic! It's answered. Okay, Alex, how do I read the question? How can I drive developers through Apigee? So Apigee by itself helps you build out awesome APIs, publish those APIs on the dev portal. We've got some fantastic mechanisms to actually publish those APIs on the dev portal. We'll help you monitor the developer funnel. We'll help you understand which developers are using and not using. We'll help you monetize on all of them. But the marketing program and others that you've got to do to attract developers is up to you. And as I was pointing out, given that we are part of Apigee, we are part of Google, we are actually leveraging Google's demand surfaces to bring traffic to your API. So that's a kind of a separate offering called Connect with Google that we're doing. But the next webcast, Alex will cover exactly this. Our phenomenal speaker will actually talk to you about how they're using Apigee and other techniques to actually win there. Okay, James, not more blue and red dots. Okay, whatever that meant, I'm going to ignore that one for now. So, James, you can send me mail later on if you think that simulation needs to be improved. How can you help customer like Walgreens? I do the forward budget planning for user API considering the likely variable. That's a fantastic question. We've got an offering called the Compass offering, which is really designed for helping our customers think through the business planning around their API program and really helping understand what are the things, how do you go from kind of project mindset to a product mindset? And for most of our customers that have succeeded, they've realized that they need to have kind of a product mindset. Just like you're kind of building your core products, you need to build out an API product. And our Compass tool and others help you kind of think through what are the investment cycles and others in order to make that happen. Does Drupal Pro can display all products in Apigee? Yes. The answer is yes. This is a question by Abhiram. The answer is yes. Andrew, I'm just going through randomly so that we are not kind of bogged down into one of them. How effective are hackathons to attract developers to APIs? Hackathons are good. We do what are called API jams, which are really not hackathons per se. Hackathons are extremely useful, but what you've got to kind of make sure is that there's some sustained value as opposed to just excitement for that weekend that particularly happens. So, for example, Pitney Bowes, and you should definitely see what Pitney Bowes has done. Pitney Bowes started off with hackathons, but then they realized that they need actually sustained advertising budget and others in order to be able to be front of mind for all developers. So you've got to kind of have a mix of marketing things, and hackathons does play an important role, but not the only role. Bipin, we want to develop applications by consuming other APIs. How easy is it for developers to start developing applications? Can you please give some demo? So I'm not going to, we're going to develop applications by consuming other API. How is it for developers? So this is very easy. Of course, I'm not going to give a demo right now, but it is really easy. If you're a developer and there's an API that you want to actually consume, then it's as trivial as you signing up for that API, and you get a key, and when you get a key, you are able to then generate some test traffic and others. So all our customers follow this best practice because the idea is not to make API easy for the service providers, but to make APIs really consumable by the developers, and that's what Apigee is really focused on. Okay, I'm just going to answer one more question. Okay, and then we're going to. Balaji, how customers with traditional B2B setup can take advantage to increase their output? Okay, so this is a fantastic question. This is a question that we get asked a lot, which is that is open APIs the only way in which you actually will be able to attract developers? The answer is absolutely not. Open APIs is generally a good model, but even in those open APIs, the model is not that you're finding developers on the street who come and write to your applications. In reality, even with open APIs, you're actually working with partners and others to actually have them build applications. So a lot of what I've talked about is not about finding random developers, even though I gave a couple of examples of that, but it is really about, even for all the developers that Pitney Bowes finds from Google search, a much larger fraction of its business comes from developers that it effectively sells to, but based on partnerships and long-running partnerships and others. So I think that having an open API does not preclude having a phenomenal partnership. In fact, partnership is probably the way in which 90% of our customers actually bring traffic to their APIs. And that's a way to actually establish the right terms and conditions and others. But the main thing, Balaji, that you should understand is that you don't want to do kind of side deals with your partners. You want to be open, and everything that you can do with your partners, you should be able to do with third-party developers also. Okay. I wish our dev portal to do more work include how secure is the service? Oh my God. Security is job one for us. And obviously nothing is 100% secure, but we take API security extremely seriously. We are at Google. Google takes security extremely seriously. Google gets attacked left, right, and center. You can protect the API with your keys. We don't get to see them. We can store your keys. You can store your keys. We got the product called Apigee Sense that enables you to actually protect against bot attacks and others. So we've got JSON threat protection, and it was all built into it. We take API security extremely seriously. We need to empower our team for using Apigee, HCP Mark Builder, CIC, and the healthcare IT workflow. What's the part to get started to collaborate with Apigee team? Just send me mail, and I will get our partner team to kind of. I'll just make sure that I understand what are things that you really need. But I'm assuming that from what I can see, I'm assuming you're a partner of ours, and we'll just make sure that moderator others come back and do the right thing for you. Alex, another question. Okay, I think I answered this without it came back again as green. First one. Okay, I'm not current. Okay, I'm not. Can you just read the question for me? Because I'm not finding it.
How long does it take to build a great functional professional developer portal with Apigee?
Okay, we've got two things. If you really care about every pixel and everything else, then we've got the right plugins into Drupal 7 and coming in Drupal 8. But otherwise, out of the box, we have our own portal that allows you to actually get started immediately, and we continue to enhance that. And in fact, the speaker the next talk will actually address a lot about both what they use and what's coming. Okay, anything else? Okay, so with that, I want to just kind of get to the next thing. Many of you are Apigee customers. Thank you very, very much. We wouldn't be here without you. Many of you are kind of kicking the tires. I hope that I've kind of helped you understand the power of APIs and ecosystems and what can be done with it. But before you get to ecosystems, you have to actually build awesome APIs and be able to publicize them. And Apigee as a platform actually helps you do that. So we hope that for those of you who are non-customers, actually sign up today and get to play with something that we have put our blood, sweat, and tears over the course of the last 7 years. And then finally, I really, really want to thank all of you for taking this time and spending about 50 minutes with us. I hope it was educational, and we're looking forward to your feedback. Okay, thank you very much.